childhood up, we have had to conform to a certain social game. And so we're in a constant state of competition. Criticism, secret. You can't make a mistake.
Welcome everyone to Friends of Failure, where we discuss the reality and necessity of failure. We are your hosts, Sam and Megan.
Heyo.
This podcast sets out to make failure a normal topic of discussion through conversations between two friends focusing on life experiences, whether it be personal, guest, or fan failure stories that are submitted. Today's episode is going to be about death. And right out the gate, we would like to put a disclaimer that this topic sometimes isn't easy for people to listen to or even talk about. And so tread lightly, right? There will be a little bit of discussion about suicide and
mental health
things,
and
mental health, right?
Yeah.
So if any of those topics might not be something you would like to listen to today,
Be
turn
wary.
this off.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess
there we
don't
go.
listen to us.
Yeah.
Block
Just
us immediately.
Immediate termination.
Oh God.
Okay, cool. So I guess I'll start us off today.
Yeah, and also I want to say that Sam chose this topic.
This is my fault.
It's entirely his fault. We're going full gas, episode number 2. So
yeah, well, I think it's important to me and you of people being able to, well, I can't necessarily say relate, but they can at least see that there is real conversation here, and I don't think either one of us are going to be afraid of being a human. And with that being said, I think both of us have experienced a fair amount of death in our lives. For the weirdest reasons, So I'm gonna start off. I guess I'm gonna take it way back. I didn't think I was gonna do this before, but I am. The first time I experienced death and had to confront it, I was 7 years old. I was very close to my grandmother. And she had a hard fight, and when her time came, it came. And it was a very weird thing because I was very much aware that, she wasn't coming back.
Yeah.
It was presented to me in a way that a child could go, okay, hey, this is what's happened. It's okay to be sad. Later down the road, I figured out what actually happened. And that was a little sad, but it is what it is. Throughout my childhood, a lot of my family would get sick, or old age, right? It's a natural thing that we have to deal with. But I think the first time I had to deal with suicide was a family member doing so when I was in 8th grade. I didn't know the guy, but the way it hurt my family was very intense.
It's a lot. Yeah,
it really is. But I was there for my family, and that's how I looked at it, right? Are you guys okay? I mean,
but you were also a child. You were a child at the time. You were in 8th grade.
Yeah,
so
I was 13, 12?
Yeah.
Do we even have an age in 8th grade? I don't even, right?
You're just an ish in between, like a child and an adult. Yeah.
I went from 5 to 18. Something happened.
It's all dark. I don't remember
in
between.
So all of that just leads up to I guess here we are again. I was in the military. I did 4 years. And death is like a really interesting thing that gets dealt with when you're in the military. I was in the Marines, and me and my buddies did have the opportunity to go to different places in the world, some of them dangerous, some of them not so dangerous. And it's really strange because at the time, part of coping with the unknown that is death, there's a lot of dark humor that gets involved. And it's really easy to laugh about, especially when you're in the middle of nowhere and it's the same group. Culture of the same group of Marines. Like we were all just getting by the best way we knew how.
And And I think that kind of goes into one of the big things we wanted to talk about was how like failing to cope can happen after you
Sure.
experience death close to you and just all the ripple effects of that. And I think humor is always a good way to cope, but there are some, stipulations with that. It can be a band-aid in some
Sure.
ways to like actual coping and like, working through something.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And so I guess that segues into failure is not always a lack of success. I mean, that is the definition, right?
Yeah.
But I believe that we experience failure as a feeling.
Hmm.
Um, and so I didn't lose any of my close friends in the Marines during, say, combat or any other crazy things that can happen during that time. All of them, it happened afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to list names. I'm not going to say how it happened, but there were people who took their own lives. There were people who had to deal with the repercussions of places that we went to,
Hmm.
in terms of like um, health just
Yeah.
degrading, right? Um, or I mean, even some of these people just ended up in situations where accidents happen. There aren't there's no mistake that there are bad people in the world, right? And sometimes
Yeah.
bad things happen to us, right? So all of that just to lead to the point of it was really strange how some of these people, I get out of the military, they get out of the military, and years go by where maybe there was a text or a phone call, but then a long space of time where, hey, at any point in time, doesn't matter if it's 3 a.m. or 3 p.m., give me a call,
Yeah.
um, or text me. And then you get that phone call, right? That's, hey, man, I just need to let you know so and so passed away. This is what happened.
Yeah.
Um, this is what we're doing about it, right? So, like services, things like that. What's really strange about it is immediately you have a feeling of, I guess, what you would call regret of where was I? Why didn't I reach out to them?
Where did I fail in this relationship? Like, could I?
Right,
It's that feeling of like I think before we talked about it's kind of survivor's guilt. Like you feel like you could have, even though maybe logically you couldn't stop it, but you feel like you should have. Like
right.
there had to be some way to prevent this uncontrollable thing.
And and even weirder is after some time goes by and maybe you process, you start to notice the red flags that were always maybe there and
Yeah.
maybe even discussed years and years before whatever happened. Um, so what got really strange is several people have taken their lives, and you realize that you know it's kind of happened too, where there were people I went to high school with that most of the people in high school that I stayed with were a part of my circle in high school, and we stayed a circle outside. A
Yeah.
lot of those people that I had classes with, I mean, we didn't know each other. We were acquaintances that had the same job, right? We were in
Yeah.
high school trying to get our diploma. And you hear stories later, and there's a part of you that, I should feel something, but sometimes you grow apart, right? Whether it's you didn't
Yeah.
have a really tight bond, or if you and I never talk to each other again after today, 20 years from now, you could hit me up and I'd be like, oh my God, Megan, like, how are you? Where did time go? But we have that relationship, right? And
Yeah.
I have that with some people from high school and even the Marines of I haven't talked to them in years, but if they hit me up,
You
oh
have
my
those people
goodness.
in your life.
Yeah,
Yeah. I feel like I have a handful where they're that kind of friend. And then the rest is tertiary. Like I knew you at one point in my life, but I'm not that person anymore either.
right.
Um, but I've heard a lot of like people I went to high school with, which I'm not old, but I'm not, a Gen Zer. I'm not young either. But it's scary to start seeing people pass away that you went to school with,
Yeah,
even if you're not close to them. It's and normally when it's at a young age, it's a tragedy. It's like it's some
right.
kind of unexpected event. But I digress. It's never easy to hear about.
So I've had good days and bad days with suicide and having to deal with being a survivor of you lose people
Yeah.
You want to blame yourself, you want to blame them, you want to blame the world, right? You want to blame
Yeah.
the Marine Corps, whatever it is, right? And what was so strange is I kind of felt at one point I was kind of becoming numb. I mean, it would
Mhm.
still upset me, but I stopped crying. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you would hear about it and you go, okay, well, here we go again. And you know, I would take that as I was coping, right? Is I was just going straight to the point of this is what it was. But um where it got weird for me is, you know, I've had family members die, I've had friends, buddies, you know, pass away for one reason or the other. But I think where I'm really going to be able to have the conversation of failure being a feeling, right? Especially dealing with death is last November, I had a friend pass away, and we had been buddies since high school. He was a part of the circle, right?
Yeah.
And the problem with the whole thing was there was no abnormalities, there was um, no reason for it. It literally happened overnight,
It's just one of those
and
things. Yeah.
went to sleep, didn't wake up.
Yeah.
And you know, of course, an autopsy has to happen. It was really strange because, you know, him and his brothers lived together and they were questioned by the police, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, we just need to know what was going on. But and you know, that's horrifying in itself that, you know, they were so close. But you know, the thing was is I had started to develop this feeling of being calloused and like, oh, I've dealt with death so much, like, you know,
Yeah. It didn't get to you anymore, or you felt like you couldn't.
right.
It's a
And
wall. Yeah.
so I was driving, and I had gotten a text message that was like, hey man, can we talk to you really quick? And you know, it's like, all right, cool. So I just call him, left a friend's house, I'm on the road. And I guess it was like the equivalent of a car crash. Like I felt like somebody just like T-boned me with a semi
Yeah.
truck. And of course, you know, being the smart, intelligent individual I am, I just kept driving, right? Even though I feel like I held on just long enough that obviously I started crying, but I wasn't hysterical, so I was still functioning and
You were still
driving,
kind of
whatever.
like holding it, but you shouldn't be on the road, but you're still,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, yeah, and then of
Uh,
course, you know, it's one of those things that once that wound is created, I don't think it's like being stabbed and then like, okay, this is it's like it's something that just starts tearing open and
Yeah.
it's gonna get as big as it needs to get. Um, I wouldn't say I handled it well. I completely shut off. I mean, for at least 24 hours, maybe closer to 30 hours. Uh, I locked myself in a room and
I feel
obviously
like
cried.
I feel like it's okay to not be good at
Sure,
coping with that, especially the first, I don't know. For me, it
few
took like
days.
years, but
Sure. I mean, it doesn't go away, but I mean, I completely shut down. There was no time. There was no
yeah,
more people. I tried to let some people know of, hey, this happened. Leave me alone.
yeah.
Um, but that feeling drowned me, you know, for at least 24 hours of immediately it was um guilt, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you know, I could have saw him last week. I could have saw him 2 weeks ago.
Do you feel like a failure as a friend? You're like, how could I have gotten more time with this person?
Sure.
How could I
Or
have,
how
yeah,
did I not see it coming? Right.
yeah.
But
And
he didn't see it coming either.
in
You
your
know what I mean?
scenario, it's literally there's no way you could have seen anything.
And so I guess to tie it in with the failure part is, you know, I didn't handle that first week very well. You know, I have a brother. He knows me really well. I know him really well. And his whole his whole regime was, hey man, like, have you drank any water? Have you eaten any food? And you know, that's not what you're worried about, right?
No, you don't think
I'm
about
not
it.
hungry, right? I've been swallowing snot for the last God knows how long. Like I cried so much my face was swollen. Like I
Yeah.
remember feeling like underneath my eyes and everything, my sinuses had just swelled up. And you know, I'm really grateful that if anything came out of that situation, you know, there were people there who they just let it happen. You know,
Yeah.
they were the behind the scenes going like, okay, we got to make sure he's drinking water. Like, you know, my brother called a couple of people and we're like, you need to reach out and just
Yeah.
talk to him if he wants to talk. But I did at one point, the rage hit, and who's to blame, right? So you start blaming people in the friend circle. You start blaming him, which he's the
Yeah.
one that passed away. I blame myself. I start blaming the world, and
Well,
you're just
what are the stages? I don't know, and I probably should know at this point. Acceptance is at the end.
yeah. Well, and
Uh,
well, and people would argue that that's maybe like the longest road, because there's days where you accept it and days where you feel like you can't.
I feel like denial was the longest for me, for most of my people I've lost. I just denied, even like I would shut it out until like it had to
Sure.
come out, and then it became a whole thing. Yeah.
So I think what's really important is you're not wrong understanding how to go through stages of it, right? So the first one is shock and denial, which is right out the gate, right?
Mhm.
You get hit by the bus,
Yeah.
it's really funny, especially I guess as a man, right? And I'm not saying
Are you about to be
women don't have to.
sexist? Okay.
No, what I'm saying is everyone acts like
Are you talking about
what
men
it
like
what is
crying?
what
Yeah.
does it mean to be like tough, right?
Yeah.
And crying is a uncontrollable
Yeah.
thing whenever the right emotions hit. And I mean, I've cried from being so happy, right? And so being on the other end of the spectrum where you think you've been desensitized to death to a point where you're like, okay, another one of my friends took his life, like this sucks, I got to make sure everybody's okay, I need to reach out to the right people. To if someone had told me like, hey, we're going to kill your whole family, you
God.
cannot cry, I would not have the ability not to cry. It was a completely uncontrollable
Yeah.
thing, and it was shock, right? I don't look back at it and think denial. I mean, obviously I denied it. There's waves of shock from the fact that your brain tries to wrap your head around, well, no, I'm gonna wake up tomorrow,
Yeah.
nah, he went on vacation, he's coming back.
Yeah. Like it just doesn't feel real. And that's your brain trying to like patch up that scenario that you don't want to
For
think
sure.
about. Yeah. And we've talked about the waves of sorrow, like how
Mhm.
that kind of works. And
Which 100% shout out to
yeah.
Jocko Willink. He paired up with a guy named Akira the Dawn,
Yeah.
and they made a audio kind of motivational speech.
Akira in general is just awesome, and you got me into him. So yeah, thank you for
Yeah,
that.
you can see that on Amazon, I'm sure on Spotify as well.
It's
But
everywhere. Yeah.
Jocko Willink was is a Navy SEAL, and he went around and talked, answering questions. And so Akira the Dawn took these samples of conversation and made music. One of them is called Waves of Sorrow. I mean, even if you haven't lost anyone, just listening to him talk about it, it's pretty on point. And I
Yeah.
mean, he talks about how no one can tell you how to grieve. You
Hmm.
just have to do it. And so the next stage after shock and denial would be pain and guilt, which I think those kind of combined right out the gate. 1 and 2 were happening simultaneously for me.
Yeah.
But then the anger part came. Um, and it's weird because you don't have anyone to blame, so you blame yourself,
It
which is
normally
completely.
it'll turn inwards, like even when you have literally no control.
I think that has, and maybe you have a different input on it, but I think it has something to do with, wow, I am feeling severe amounts of emotion that hurts really, really bad. And you start to feel like you're inflicting it upon yourself because of how you're reacting to someone dying.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know
I,
what I mean?
I
Like there's so
do.
much anger, but what are you going to do with it? I went to
Uh,
the gym. Like I'm a gym rat, right? I like to go to the gym. I went to the gym and had, I mean, I just drank a bunch of pre-workout, which is just high amounts of caffeine and God knows what else, right?
Tried to
And
have a
then,
heart attack. Yeah.
well, I was like, well, you're not going alone, right?
Oh my
But
God.
but I went to the gym, and that's the only way I really know how to cope with a lot of emotions. And I had to deal with that fact. Like he ripped open band-aids and he kicked down doors that I thought I was like, I don't have to deal with this anymore. And then here I am at the gym. I mean, I went postal for about a week.
You were trying to work through it that way, which isn't, there's a certain point where it's no longer healthy, even if you're working out. Like you're just, you're
I think
abusing yourself in a way.
just hit yourself in the face with a dumbbell
Just-
over and over. Right.
You're
Just,
looking into the mirror, like you're making
Yeah.
direct eye contact, and they're like, he's back. Can you please get him out?
Yeah. Someone get this guy. He's been cut off. No more dumbbells. But that's how I really dealt with the anger part of things, because I did feel guilty, not only for how I felt about not spending time with him, but the way people had to deal with me. I mean, I was fucked up. I was really fucked up, and it was nobody's fault. And so, you know, where it gets really dark is everybody that loves you and cares about you, especially if they're really close and they know the person that you lost.
Yeah.
They want to do everything in their power to take care of you. And it's like, at the end of the day, I believe that you have to deal with death alone.
I mean, yeah, I mean, in reality, your own death, you're by yourself. No one's going to help you with that.
Right.
It's kind of the same with others. Yeah.
If you're sitting there holding someone's hand, like it's so crazy, because I can't fathom it. There's so many people that have died. There's so many things that you can read about dying, but you can't fathom it. And when you experience it, I don't know if you get to remember dying. It's like, I think it's the same way as birth. I have no recollection of being snatched out of whatever void I was in into boom, you were born.
Yeah. And I think we have similar views on, like, quote unquote, the afterlife. Like, you just don't know really what happens
at all.
And
I don't believe that we die.
I want to hope that we don't. That's how I feel.
But so people would say, like, oh, you think you go to like heaven or hell, and it's like, I don't have an answer to that. I'm just saying, so there's a group called NERD, or nerd, right? It stood for no one ever really dies. And I experienced that whenever I was a kid, and I just enjoyed the music, but that always resonated with me, as no one ever really dies. And it's like, well, then what does that mean? And, you know, there are people who it's like, well, we're being reused. Energy can't be created or destroyed, right?
So like reincarnation a little bit.
Maybe. I don't know.
I'm open to all possibilities, but I don't commit to one. And that's like an issue for me coping with death, because I don't actually have like a solid, like, it could be anything.
There's a book that I read, and I'm not trying to like derail us like crazy.
No, we can do a sidebar.
Sidebar of the sidebar. There's a book, and I can't remember his name, but the book is called The Power of Now. And what's so amazing about that experience of, I listened to it on audiobook, but you could read it, is that there are some very profound questions that he gives you a very direct answer to. And what's so wild about it to me is the only thing that we're really experiencing is our perspective of what's happening, and how we choose to react to that, right? That's what our life is how we're reacting to the stimulations,
the stimmies, bro. I don't know.
I have a doctorate and no, I'm just kidding. It's all about how we are reacting to what's happening in our environment, or what we put into our environment. And when I was listening to that book, I was really calm, because I would listen to it every day, usually in the morning, starting my day, but also sometimes in the afternoon. And it always led back to the only thing that was real is right now. And so where it got really strange for me is I listened to this book months after my friend passed away, you know, literally out of nowhere. And there was a feeling of, you know, well, F you, like my friend was real, right? And the emotions I feel for him is still real. But what was strange about it is then things start coming up, and maybe this was like, you know, I had passed the depression point, I think, fairly quickly. I mean, I was sad for a little bit, but I think I started very quickly looking at how grateful I was for the time I did have, and being able to look at what I did have instead of what I no longer had was way better for my mental health than just going, oh my God, he's dead.
It,
I'll never, you know what I mean?
yeah, it kind of turns at a certain point. You come to
Yeah, it's
that.
literally called the upward turn at one point where you
Yeah.
leave the depression and go into, okay, a more positive outlook.
Yeah.
Um,
And I will
but
just
then,
say on that, everyone handles it differently. So if you're
sure,
listening to this, your path could be totally different. You could do the steps in different order. It could take you a different amount of time.
you could just do anger the whole time. I
Yeah.
still experience different levels of it. I mean, it's been over half a year, but you know, I guess what I want to convey from all this is that you don't have control, right? I think you and I
Mhm.
have talked about that.
A lot. Yeah.
And it's 100% okay to, you are who you are. I think one of the strangest things about becoming an adult in my 30s, I'm just going to go ahead and give it away. I'm in my 30s.
Pretty old.
Yeah, well, you know, I look 12. I think it's strange that I look back and, you know, people have started this conversation too of, you could have had a really great life, right, growing up, but there's still traumas that could have been experienced. The trauma of not having any experience is something that I've seen happen to people my age where they've done nothing,
Yeah.
right? And so then, you
When
know,
they've had nothing happen to them too. It's like sometimes a combo of both.
and then boom, the door's ripped open and you just have to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
uh, I think what really is important for me is I had a choice, and with my buddy, it was okay. I have a choice, and I had things in my life telling me that I had a choice, and part of that was, you obviously you should be sad and you should deal with
Yeah.
that, and you're going to be sad for a long time, and that's okay.
Hmm.
But you can look at what you don't have or look at what you do have. Um, and for a while there, I felt, you know, it was my duty to carry his name and his memory forward. And so I did. I talked about him to everybody, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And on that note, like when I lost the person closest to me, I got a tattoo that says, "The ones that love us never truly leave us." And I like to believe that just, you continue to talk about that person, you remember, as long as you remember, things about them, how they were, stories, they're still kind of alive in that
mhm,
sense. Um, and that's kind of a positive spin that I've tried to put on it for myself. That was one
for
way.
sure,
Yeah.
for sure. You know, and we're human. Um, so speaking of being human, I think I'm going to wrap up my part because I would love to hear, you know, your take on things. I was very human, uh, like with him, right? So
You were real with him. Like you could be on that level. Yeah.
yeah, right. Like he was there for a really long time,
Yeah.
right? Um, so I'm a person that believes, you know, when you die, you get cremated or buried, right? You like
Yeah.
let them kind of move on physically. Um, but so I was weak, right? I had a different mentality. I was, I guess, sad, right?
Hmm.
And so they cremated him, which is what he always like wanted. And so I was like, you know what? Like I would like some of his ashes. And you know, his brothers were like, absolutely, you know, come on by. And, you know, I Googled something really quick and Amazon had these little like necklaces. I
Yeah.
guess the whole mentality is like you can wear your loved one with you, like wherever you go, or
I've seen that like pop up a lot
yeah,
more recently.
I'm
It's like
sure.
keeping them with you in a way. Yeah.
Sure. And I'm sure now that we're talking about it, I'm going to get ads about these like little trinkets that hold your dead friends, right?
Oh my
But
gosh.
so I go over there and like it's not really what I'm about, but I felt compelled to be like, hey, can I have some of the ashes? So I bought it, I took it over there, and you know, I put his ashes into this, you know, it's a cool little trinket. I ended up with two. It was like a twofer kind of package. So I just put a little bit in each one.
Oh, I had a
And
really,
then
really dark joke, but I'm not gonna.
yeah. So I come home, and immediately I'm getting back into chores and stuff, because again, it does come in waves. So there's moments where you're very much, that's the only thing on the forefront of your mind, and then
Yeah.
okay, hey, back to reality, back to
And you're trying to
what needs
catch
be done.
up. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I get undressed because I'm like, these clothes need to be washed, and I turned on the washing machine, which that's a bad idea because it takes all the hot water from the shower. But I jump in the shower, do my thing. I dried the clothes, and then I was looking for the necklace, and I was like, oh God.
Ooh.
So I scurry over there, and I open it up, and I sure enough find the trinket that had him in it, in the pocket. So I had washed him and dried him, and I was like, oh my God, so the sinking feeling of, this disrespectful feeling. I opened
Yeah.
it up. Sure enough, it was like fine. The ashes were still in there. They were untainted, but I was like, if it were the other way around, he would have had the human decency to like not wash and dry me. And I laughed about it because I think it was something where he would have laughed.
Yeah. I was about to say, like, he wouldn't crucify you for that.
Yeah,
He
he'd be
would
like,
just, he'd be like, look at you.
yeah.
What'd you do there?
You just throw me in a washing machine. It's because I can't defend myself. But it was one of those things where, even though the wound was still fresh, right? I think that dark humor kind of came back, or maybe just the lightheartedness of, it doesn't have to always just be like a sad tragedy. Like, you can remember people for what they were worth.
Yeah.
I mean, I have buddies that's what I have to remember, is like they ended up in a position where they didn't feel like they had a choice, maybe. And I have to try really hard to remember, hey, 8 to 10 years ago, we were in it, and we were doing what we were doing, and it was a good time. And, so what? This is how it happened. It's like, it doesn't always have to be doom and gloom. There can be, a little bit of light, as the song we talked about talks about.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, I appreciate you hearing me out on that. I definitely think we all anticipate kind of like your side of things.
Yeah. So I feel like we both, why maybe we connected as friends is because we both have experienced something, along death or tragedy from an early-ish age. And it shapes you. Like, if you do that while you're, developing who you are, it shapes you into a different kind of person than someone who, but let's say, has never lost anyone in their 30s. You just have a different perspective, I think. It's not good or bad. I wouldn't, recommend it, but
sure. I will tell you, it surprises me because of how early on, like, when I lost my grandmother, she was the world to me, I guess, when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
There are people in their 40s that they've never lost anyone.
Yeah.
They have grandparents that are 100-something years old, and I'm like,
it's crazy to me.
It is. And I'm not like envious or jealous. It's just,
it blows my mind.
Weird.
I think that's it. It's just
it's
like
hard to wrap.
Yeah. Because it feels like sometimes death touches the same person over and over again. And then there's other people just, having a good old time. But that's a whole nother thing. I kind of wanted to transition into how mortality gives failure a different weight. Like, let's say we were immortal, we could do whatever the fuck we wanted, live forever. Failure would just be funny. Like, it would just be like, oops, you messed up. You have another like billion years to figure that out. So it's not a big deal. But because we're mortal and we can die, it's like, I got to get this right the first time. Like, that's just speaking on, thinking about your own death and your own life. But it feels, for me, like the people I've lost, which I'll get into the timeline of that, it feels like, not that they failed, but that like they no longer get all these possibilities. Or they had goals, they wanted to have kids, or they wanted to start a new job, start a new career, or something, and then they can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Buddhist thing. If you don't have bad and good, then where's the weight? Where's the emotion? If you only lived in a world with good, then how would you have depth? So it's
Yeah.
just the reality we're in. Um, so that's all of my spirituality kind of out of the gate. But you
I will tell you really quick, like I think that's a great point to start with though, because you do think about that, right?
all the time.
And
Yeah.
what's funny though is the same way that I would try, I'm just going to use my buddy as the reference, right? The one that passed away in November. Every time I think about, oh man, like I'm never going to have another conversation with him about the gym. Like he liked the gym too. And it was like, why not? I mean, people talk to the dead all the time. But then the
Yeah.
other thing is like, I'd be like, oh, he's never going to have, the wife, the kids, but he's also never going to have to deal with, he's never going to have cancer, right? He didn't die of cancer, right? He's never going to have to deal
He
with
won't
that. He's not going to have to,
suffer. Like he's not
right.
stuff. I don't believe, I think we're both on the same page there. Like if you're dead, you're not suffering. So there's
At
that.
least not in the same regard of human life here. I mean, if we
Yeah.
don't know what happens after, we do know that there is happiness and suffering here.
Yeah.
And so he's not on this platform anymore. I guess this is just another social media.
I was about to say he's not on
Uh
TikTok anymore. He moved over to
yeah.
Instagram, and
He
their
left
heaven and
Instagram.
hell is a little different.
Wow. Uh RIP Instagram, right?
Oh my gosh.
Back to what you're saying though.
So I'll kind of do the timeline that you did. My first so I did lose a grandpa when I was little, but I was 4, so I don't
Mhm.
he was just there and then not there. I think it affected seeing how it affected my mom was more of a thing, and because she lost her dad right before she had my brother, so she was pregnant and lost her dad,
Mhm.
and that has like a huge impact on a person. So that was the earliest, but I wouldn't say that one because I was so young. It hit me hard. The first one that really like took my breath away and made me feel what you were describing, that like car crash, was a family member when I was 16 or 17 in high school, and we just got a call that like they had suddenly passed. They didn't know what happened. She was young, had children, um, and it just kind of shattered the whole reality. Like, because I was a stupid teenager, just doing stupid stuff the day
Yep.
before, and then you're like, oh my god, like, and then you start thinking about not only is that person gone, but I'm gonna die, and it sends you for a big old loop.
Yeah, the moral question then arises whether you want it to or
Yeah,
not, right?
yeah,
Kind of shoved into your face.
it's unavoidable. And that's just kind of when it started. I would say the year that like changed it all for me was 2016. I lost someone super close to me.
Mhm.
And then I lost 2 other people in the same year, another relative and then a friend. Um, and the friend was another like she was like 26. It was sudden. I had been to the hospital to see her like a month before, but she got out and she was fine. And then, suddenly she's gone.
Yeah.
And that's when, the coping and you're starting to go through the cycles again. I think I stayed in denial for like a year or 2,
Mhm.
and I just kept failing to catch on that, hey, this isn't right. Like I can't keep doing this cycle of unhealthy behaviors and avoiding the topic. Like I just kept, I wouldn't call it self-harm, but like it wasn't self-help. Like I wasn't putting myself in good positions.
Mhm.
Um, and it was weird because the same year, the beginning of the year, all of that happened. I lost 3 people, and then I graduated college at the end of the year. So on one hand, I was like, I'm miserable, And then the other hand, it was like, but I graduated. Woo.
Right. That
Like
duality is pretty intense.
it was insane. And it was just the weirdest thing. So like on one hand, I think I kind of like threw myself into finishing school, and I will say I didn't finish it great, but I did it. Um, but you feel, because it feels like someone's missing when you have a big moment and they're not there. So like succeeding and feeling like, hey, I'm doing something, and then you turn around and you're like, oh shit, that person isn't there.
Right.
It kind of takes away, like you're like, what? And then you're like, does this even matter? Does this success even matter? And it definitely didn't help. I should have been feeling like, hey, I'm young, I graduated college, the world is my oyster, that kind of thing. And it just felt like, all right, I did
Now
it.
what?
Like on to the next thing. And the next thing was working at the same place where we worked together.
Where this all really started.
Yeah, where the problems began. No, I'm kidding.
So I'm going to blame this podcast episode on the fact that you graduated college. That's what I'm picking up here. It's not that it was my idea. It's that if you would have never graduated college, then no.
Well, I wouldn't have gotten that job. And yeah, we never would have probably met. I would not have lived where I live now.
We don't know that. We don't know anything, do we?
We truly don't.
There's no control.
And that's how the next like 30 minutes of the podcast is us just screaming. Yeah.
I did want to point out something too, because the thing that's strange about death is it does affect us all differently.
Oh yeah.
And there have been people that I have found out have passed away for whatever reason, and I was, other than kind of think about it that day, kind of unaffected. And and even in that situation, you kind of feel guilty because you're like, someone passed away. But where it gets really dark is whenever you get slapped in the face with it, you do have to, I guess, accept the fact that every day, I mean, even right now as we're talking about this, or even when people are listening to this, like, people are passing away. I mean, it's this revolving door of like human life. It's really
a
crazy.
Constant. Yeah.
Well, there's bajillions of us, and what's crazy is that I have seen people that were, when I was younger, they were pillars in my life, and death shook them so hard that it shook everyone around them, where you were like, oh, you're not a superhero, you're a human being,
Yeah.
Because sometimes death changes you.
Well, sometimes, and I don't ever want to say it's a failure when someone can't cope with it, because dude, same. Like I've been in that mindset. Like I can understand that, but sometimes people never really, come back to themselves after death. And it may be good or bad. Maybe they become bitter, resentful. They, don't treat people well because they're so mad. They're stuck in that mad phase. But I think for others, like it definitely forever changed me. It just makes me look at life different. My priorities are different. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but also it made me who I am. So
fair. I rekindled friendships because of death, right? Where, hey, I haven't talked to you in a while. How are you doing? Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say is I wrote down a quote before we started that we kind of talked about that relates directly to this. And it's from an article. I'll try to source it in the notes of the video because I did not write it down. But it was an article about death and failure, and it was really interesting. But the quote is, "Death, of course, is not a failure. Death is normal. Death may be the enemy, but it is also the natural order of things." So it just goes back to like, it may feel like a bad end, like an unfair loss or failure, but you can't control it. It goes back to, a lot of it has very little control. I don't know the other word but you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I slip in and out of a mentality sometimes where we're watching a movie So what I mean by that is there is an ending and there's a beginning. I don't remember watching this movie, starting it, right? But it's so strange because you go to sleep, you have all these dreams, and it's as if you're yourself. But when I remember dreams, I don't go, I was skydiving and fighting, Ninja Turtles, and that was me. It's always a movie that I saw in my head, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder if reality is just another one of those dream movies that I'm watching.
There's some dude that's listening or watching this right now, and he's like a little toked, and he's just like,
And he's like,
what?
yeah, dream movies, man. And it's true.
Inception.
It's all a dream within a dream within a dream.
Oh, I gotta spin your little top. I don't know.
Well, I lost mine, so I haven't been able to figure out if I'm awake or not. So it's gotten crazy. I love and kind of hate when people are like, hey man, how you doing? I'm living the dream. It's a nightmare, but I'm living it. And I'm like, you had to add the nightmare part? God.
I actually like that. I feel like I'm gonna add that.
The problem is that as a human being who goes, hey man, how you doing? When they say living the dream, you just it could be a neutral dream. It doesn't have to be a good or a bad dream, but as soon as you go living the dream, it's a nightmare. Oh boy. Okay. Well,
I want that as a tattoo now. Like that sounds
living the it's just on your forearm, living the
no,
dream.
I want to do like Post Malone and put like living the dream, it's a nightmare, like right there on my face.
Okay.
Right.
I figured it would be like a forearm tattoo where it's living the dream and then it says like Nightmare on Elm Street Part 9.
Oh God.
Yeah. Nobody wants that. Don't do that.
Someone's gonna get that now.
I know, right? Check out this. Oh man. They called it fan failure and they're like, so one time I listened to this podcast and then I got a tattoo.
And then I got a tattoo and we're like, please don't do that. It's not a good thing to do. Would not suggest it. I did want to loop back around. So like 2016, graduated, feeling mixed, like feeling successful, but also like there was loss. So it didn't feel like a true, I made it. And then I would say that whole year at that company, which in the last episode, I kept name dropping it and I didn't mean to, so that'll be a whole thing. But at that nameless company that we worked at together, that was the year after all that loss. And I just didn't deal with it the whole time because I was busy. I was working nonstop and I mentally could barely handle the job because the intensity. And when I finally got out of that and got into where I am now, where I have, normal hours and work-life balance, I went to therapy finally. I would say if you're out there and you're considering therapy, but something's stopping you, just do it. Even if it's not, you have to find the right person. It's kind of like dating at first. But once you get the right person, it is life-changing to get that stuff out. Because I was just holding it in, like didn't talk to people close to me about it. Even my best friend, my fiance, like it was a wall. And now I'm talking about it, and like before, I would not have gotten these words out. Like it would have just stopped. You would have asked me about someone I lost, I would have shut off the conversation right there.
I won't lie to you because I remember when we worked together, I think part of what allowed us to develop a friendship is you always would go around and talk to the workers, right? And it would, hey, how are you doing? Is there anything I can do for you? Like, I'm touching base here. And you would ask me like, hey, how you doing? And there would just be days where I was like, I don't care like how I'm doing. I'm just going to get this done. How are you doing? And I remember there was a time where you kind of mentioned about what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But you did it in such a fashion that I was confused. I remember,
that sounds about right.
Well, because I was like, did this just happen? Or is this like, it happened a long time ago? And then I would get little pieces of it. And the way I handled it was, you talk about it as much as you want. I'm not really here to ask questions. You know what I mean? Because sometimes I mean, just like at the beginning of the episode, people aren't in a place where, hey, I don't want to talk about this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You have to be in a certain mindset to.
Well, and then there's that whole fear, like, I don't want to be rude. So if someone's like, hey man, you look like you haven't slept in 3 days, like,
And
let's
then,
talk about suicide. And you're like, oh
yeah.
my goodness.
Yeah. Jesus.
Cannot handle that. Yeah. But I it's so strange because you're right.
Well,
I very much believe in therapy. I don't think I've really gotten therapy. I've gotten something close to almost that, but that's a whole episode in itself.
yeah,
So
that might be like an extended edition.
nah, we'll never talk about that again.
You're like, I'm actually gonna bag that right now.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and delete, right?
But back to like you couldn't tell how long it had been. I think it's because I, up until therapy, felt like it happened yesterday. Like that's it just kept feeling like, oh, this just happened. I don't know what to do with it. All right, shut it down. We got to do today. And that was just on repeat for like 2 years. And
Yeah.
then my first therapist, this is my warning. They're not all going to be great. The first one I went to, I told her my story, told her why I wanted therapy, and she cried. And
Wow.
I was like, okay, well, that's a big turn off. Feel like professionally, you're not supposed to do that. So that's a fail on her part.
She's human.
She is human, but
she didn't run straight for the glass window on the 10th story building, and
oh god, that's therapy. That's
yeah.
Great.
Why are we having therapy sessions about some really serious stuff on the 10th floor? Has anyone not thought about?
What's really funny is my current therapist is on like the 6th floor of a tall building.
Yeah, man, it doesn't make any sense to me. Not a lick of sense. It should be in a basement, if anything. You know what I'm saying?
They like lock you in. They're like, all right, you're good.
All right, we're gonna get through some feelings today.
Strap you down.
Yeah. So
yeah.
wait, how many therapists have you had?
I would say 3 in the time since I started the journey. And my journey has, I don't know. I hate that word.
It's what it is, man. It is what it is.
It's my journey.
Oh,
yeah.
like that.
See, that's what I hear every time I've had 3. The first one cried. The second one helped me get comfortable. Like I didn't get very far with her. I wouldn't say she got like all the way there, but just talking about stuff. Cause I was like a locked box. They'd be like, tell me about your loss. And I'd be like, it sucked. It was not good.
Yeah.
But they would have to like peel it out of me. And then the one I have now, shout out to her, has really, really helped me work through stuff. I don't know if you know what EMDR is, but I would definitely recommend looking it up. It's like a type of therapy. So I do talk therapy with her, and then I'll also do EMDR. He's writing it down.
I am writing it down.
It's not EDM music. You don't go raving with your therapist. But it basically is like a science proven method of reassociating bad thoughts with good thoughts. So like when you think of that person you lost, you don't just think of the terrible way that they died or the scenario around it that you get looped into, which is what I used to do. I would just kind of play it over and over and over. But now it feels like that thought can pop up about that person and it's not immediately bad. It's not immediately like their worst moment, like leading up to that.
Yeah.
The darkest point. It's like, oh, they were a person before that and I loved them. And I could never have gotten there on my own. Like, I feel like I would have just kept bearing that down.
Sure. I mean, even today, knowing that we were going to talk about this, I went to the gym, right? I'm going to be that guy. I just talk about the gym all the time. Gym and milk. That's the only 2 things that matter, right? I after at the gym, I like to work out, but then I like to sit in a steam room or a dry sauna. Sometimes I alternate, whatever. But the reason I do it is I like to sit there for a while. 30 minutes up to an hour. I do not recommend that. Don't just go into a dry sauna or a steam room
Just
and just
lock
sit there for an
yourself
hour.
in there. Yeah.
It's not a good idea. I mean, I drink a lot of water, and even then, I mean, you sweat so much that
Yeah.
you're depleted, right? But I allowed myself the time not only to do that, as a space where eventually it's inevitable. I just end up calm because it's so hot. Like any
Yeah.
anxieties or things bounce in my head, they
It
just turn off.
physically like forces you into it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm literally cooking myself like a ham, you know. But today I did that where I was sitting there and I gave myself the allowance, I guess, of hey, go ahead and think about the bad stuff.
Mhm.
Because normally I'm kind of in the opposite where I force myself, don't think about the bad part, because then I'm afraid I'm going to just remember the bad stuff and forget all the good stuff.
Yeah.
But man, if you don't think about the bad stuff a little bit, you how are you supposed to process it? Because you know what I mean. I
Yeah.
was intentionally shoving it out of my
At a certain point, like you have to
brain,
make yourself think about it so that anytime it comes up, it's not, a vicious cycle. Like it's
like a
not.
raw scab that keeps getting ripped open or
Well,
whatever.
for mine, it was just I would play the story end to end. If it came up, I would play the bad or like the hard parts on a timeline end to end in my head over and
Mm,
over. And it drives you crazy. Like it doesn't, because your mind's like looking for like, what if I did this? What if I did that? What if you feel like you failed in some way and you're trying to find the plot hole in this little movie that's playing, but there's not one because you can't control that. And that's what therapy has
yeah,
taught me. Like I was 21 when this happened. I did not know how to prevent any of this. I One thing we have like said in therapy is you did the best you could and you're okay with that now. Like that's
mm-hmm.
because it was hard to, I felt like I should have known more because now I just in general know how to deal with that stuff better. And that kind of leads into mental health because after that, and then uh, God, I think it was like a year or two ago. I'm not good with timelines. I lost someone else for something mental health related that I was
Yeah,
close to, and it was hard because it felt like round two in a way.
mm,
Um, and he was young, had a child, and I was like talking to him regularly because he was going through a hard time. And when talking to someone who's depressed, who's going through that, it's hard to get them out of that loop. You feel like you can save them, but there's really, you can't. Like they either need
mm-hmm.
treatment or they have to work through it themselves. um and that was hard to come to terms with for a while because I felt like
It's
you torture yourself with it. You're like, I feel like I can save this person.
100%.
Yeah.
What's so strange about this conversation we're having is, we could have had a conversation about mental health, right?
Mhm.
And some of the death stuff would have came up, but so of, the reason why it kind of feels gimmicky when you say like, hey, I'm on a journey, right? Is because what's really strange is it's like they want us to believe, let's say like all the music and the movies and the TV that we watch, that you just wake up and you live your life, right? And
Yeah.
you're doing the hustle and you're doing the thing, but like at some point in time, you open your eyes and you go, oh man, there is some real stuff going on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm not here to be anti-drinking, but there are people that I know that they have to go through steps and they have to have people hold them accountable so
Yeah.
they stop drinking, right? Or drugs in general. I have met people as a personal trainer where, hey, I need someone to make me work out because I sit around all the time and it's killing me.
Hmm.
And then of
We're the
course,
most harm to ourselves. Everyone has some
100,
kind of trauma, which that could be a whole thing.
right.
Everyone
Well,
has some kind
so
of trauma and a bad coping mechanism. They're failing to figure out how to deal with
right.
this like learned habit.
So the reason I brought that up was because no matter what it is, whether it's, hey, I'm dealing with coping and my mental health is suffering, I have a abuse problem, whether it's drugs or alcohol, I need help, or
Hmm.
hey, I have a diet and workout problem, right, where I'm too lethargic or whatever.
Mhm.
The problem is you could pay someone, but if you don't want it or you're not willing to do the work, whether it's the
It's
gym
never
or
gonna
the
happen.
therapy,
Yeah.
ever. And it's crazy because I think a lot of us are trying to find a way not to have that responsibility, right? Where, man, I don't want to deal with this. Hey, Megan, take this, all right? Unpack it, right?
Figure it out
Decompress,
for me and then give
figure
it
it out.
back.
I need
Yeah.
a 200,000 word essay and a PowerPoint. Let me know when you got it all figured out. I'm gonna go eat ice cream and have a good time over here. It's a topic that people could talk about from so many different standpoints, right?
Yeah.
And how it had affected them. And, you know, obviously we're not here trying to tell people how they should feel or how they should deal with things, but just have a conversation of the spectrum is huge. The feelings and you know, even the topic of failure, I think it's really big. And I think that's what we're exploring in this podcast, right?
Well, yeah, and I think it literally touches every bit of life. It's always there. There's this
Mhm.
fear. If it's not like in the forefront of your mind, it's in the back of your mind as a fear of it.
Mhm.
Like right now, both of us are scared that this is gonna suck, or we're terrible, or we're gonna get
Sure.
canceled, or whatever it is. Because we're human. I will admit that. Like I don't want to publicly embarrass myself, but here we are going.
You know, I you know, I don't, I think we've entered a place in our lives where
We don't care about, yeah.
I know as a human being, neither you or I are going out of our way to hurt people.
Yeah.
I think at a certain point you have to, you know, for instance, friends die and you go, okay, well, they can't do it. I owe it to myself and to them now, right? And of course, I put this on myself. Hey, you need to go live a life,
Mhm.
right? And you know, I used to have a fear for a long time that I was going to be the guy that was in the Marine Corps for 4 years, and that was going to be the craziest and most fun and most exciting and most exaggerated form of life I was ever going to get.
Yeah.
And I was going to end up being that guy that's in his 50s and 60s talking about, oh man, when I was in the Marine Corps, and there was only a 4 year section of my teeny tiny life.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why partially we're here is, look, success is defined by the person perceiving what success is, right?
Mhm.
I don't think we're comparing ourselves anymore. We're doing what we want to do. And I think there's a passion in that,
I
you
think
know,
that's why it's gonna, I don't want to
it's
say
going to be
work.
whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, that's why it's going to happen, or how it's going to happen, is we're just kind of rolling with it, letting it do its thing.
Because I think having a similar vision helps us. But
Yeah.
look, man, if we do this for 1 year, 5 years, whatever, and we have a good time with it, and it's not debilitating to our lives, rock and
Yeah.
roll, let's go. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Yo, dude, so thanks for having that conversation with me.
Yeah, that was intense. It's a
Yeah.
lot. But I feel good because I feel like people need to hear it. Either they've dealt with something similar, or they haven't and they just want that perspective. So yeah, we just basically had a therapy session via this podcast.
I have no control. Got it.
And please don't
And, right.
That's not the message to leave with. So with that, I guess we'll kind of sign off and get out of
Yeah.
here.
Let's get out of here, guys.
Yeah, let's go.
Hey, let's skedaddle. Let's go.
So thanks for tuning in, of course. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We are officially on Spotify and iTunes, but you can find us on pretty much any other podcast audio site. YouTubers, thanks for being here and watching the mess in person. Salute. Please, if you can, if you liked it, if you hated it, subscribe on all platforms. And then that brings us into social media. We are on almost everything. So you can find us under Friends of Failure on Facebook, TikTok. Sam just did his first TikTok, by the way. So
oh baby,
he was
hey, look, it's not a shining star, but we'll see.
He's dipping his toes in the water. I liked it. I think it's good.
It was right before we filmed this. I
It
just said, you
was.
know what? I'm gonna ticky-tacky and see what happens.
I think it's gonna be good.
Right after they look up pictures of me in 2008 on Facebook, they're gonna go.
Why
look
do you
at my
keep bringing it
first-
up? You're just baiting them into it.
There's gonna be something there waiting for them, you know. Just me in 2008 with a sign saying, "We knew you'd be here," and they'd be like, "How did he know?"
Oh my god, he
I
predicted
time
it. But yeah, so social media, we're on all that good stuff. But my favorite thing is to ask you guys for your failures. We really want to hear them. Any learning moments you have, you can email them to us at friendsoffailurepodcast@gmail.com. friendsoffailurepodcast@gmail.com. I'll say it a little slower because I ran through that one. And then you can also leave us a voicemail if you're a vocal person like Sam here. And you can call at 916-304-3545.
Awesome.
And just we'll put it on the podcast. You can also be anonymous, put your name to it. Don't shame people. Just hide their identities if you need to.
Their social is 7729496. Oh my god.
I just imagine that like I get the number wrong and then they're sending like voicemails to some random person in like Minnesota.
Some like elderly person who's like, why is this happening to me? God. Awesome. Well, I look forward to hearing from people. I would love feedback. I'll try to read comments and take suggestions. But I think the important part whenever we sign out is two thoughts that I think we both agree we should share, and we'll probably say it every time, but life is happening for you, not to you, right? So don't be afraid to go out there and fail.
Pew, 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 pew.
That's right.
If it's not I'm stronger than you, it's I'm wiser than you, I'm more loving than you, I'm more tolerant than you, I'm more sophisticated than you. It doesn't matter what it is, but this constant competition is going on. This is the secret. This is the secret. You can't make a mistake.